Welcome to the Cables2Clouds podcast. Cloud adoption is on the rise, and many network infrastructure professionals are being asked to adopt a hybrid approach. As individuals who have already started this journey, we would like to empower those professionals with the tools and the knowledge to bridge the gap.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cables2Clouds podcast. My name is Alex Perkins. I am at Bumps in the Wire on Twitter, and I will be your host for today's episode. Joining me, as always, are my two handsome co-hosts, Chris Miles at BGP Maine and Tim McConaughey at Juan Golbez. Tim, what have you been up to lately?
Let's see. What have I been up to? So last week, I spent the week in Montreal, Canada, which was pretty cool. I took the week off and just I went up there. I hadn't been to Montreal before, and I picked the best time to go, which is to say when there's wildfires raging in Quebec. And I even picked the best day to go, which last Monday, they pretty much shut down the whole East Coast for the Northeast Coast for flying and all that because of weather. So I got stuck in LaGuardia. And
Overnight?
So I had to actually go into the city to find a hotel to stay at. So yeah, it was totally overnight. They canceled the flight. I went the next day, but yeah, it was pretty garbage. But you know what, Montreal, it was really cool. Really enjoyed it. So back now, just getting ready to planning the last little bit for my for our trip to Japan, and that's it.
Nice. Well,
If you had to spend the night at the airport, which one would you have picked, JFK or LaGuardia?
Oh man, that's I do. God, no. I don't. I'd probably just take my chances on the streets. I'd be like, hey, you give me one of them trash bags so I can sidle up next to you and snuggle. But yeah, I know I don't know, man.
I've spent 2 nights at Reagan throughout my life, and it is terrible, man. Not fun at all.
I did a night at DFW, also not fun. They have some benches that were actually kind of comfortable, but I wouldn't recommend sleeping on them.
Yeah, that's the problem with sleeping at it. And pick an airport, man. They're all going to be like that. Even unless you can sleep in the lounge or something, sleep in your American Airlines lounge or one of those Delta lounges or something.
Or the USO. I got lucky in Seattle one time. I was stuck when I went to Alaska to live there for my last duty assignment. I got stuck in Seattle, and luckily they had a USO where I could go sleep on a bunk bed for the night.
Nice.
That was cool. Yeah,
that's sick.
Yeah, how about you, Chris? What have you been up to?
Not a ton. I did have a nice productive week. A lot of Terraform heavy week, which is always fun because you spend a lot of time just pounding away at that and not talking to people, which is sometimes a nice break. Coming up this weekend though, I am actually headed. Me and my girlfriend and a few of our friends are heading down to this place called Mount Kosciuszko, which is like one of the only snowy places in this side of the country where you can go skiing and snowboarding and things like that. So, next time you see me, I might be coming back with an injury. We'll see. I am very prone to eating shit whenever I'm snowboarding.
Do you ski or snowboard?
I've only snowboarded ever in my life. Yeah, I've been skateboarding since I was like 13, and I remember whenever I first went snowboarding, I was like, oh, that'd be a piece of cake. It's just the same thing. It's just on snow, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It is night and day different. All about where you control the board. When you're skateboarding, you control with the front of the board and your front foot, right? And snowboarding, it's all on the back foot, right? And the way you stop is That was my worst thing. I could get going down these mountains. I was like cooking, dude, just like flying. But then when it came time to stop, it was just like, fuck, dude. That's when I was like tumbling. And snow is, you think it's soft, but it's not. It's pretty packed in.
Not at speed. Not at speed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And snow, man, there's so much like style with snowboarding, like buttering, everything.
Oh,
man.
yeah, right.
There's just so much cool stuff you can do with like just how you flow with the board and stuff. So that's cool.
I won't be doing that. I'll be more concerned with not embarrassing myself trying to get off the lift.
You gotta do the French fry and the pizza.
Yeah, that's I've never tried skiing, and if it wasn't too much money to rent both sets of equipment, I would try both, but probably won't do that this time.
Nice.
How about
cool.
you, Alex? What's new?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, for me, I haven't been up to too much. Kids are in swimming lessons. We finally got them in swimming lessons this summer, and it's been every day. So they have been absolutely exhausted. By the end of the week, they're all burnt, and we put sunscreen and everything on them. But man, it is no joke. The weather has been pretty crazy out here. It's supposed to rain brutal. Like every day, but then it doesn't rain, and it's just 90 degrees, which is hot out here.
It's just cooking. It's just absolutely beating down the sun over here too, man. It's just cooking this place.
I like how you're like, yeah, 90 degrees. It's hot out here. It's like that's hot in general, brother. That's I think that's
no. I'm just saying I've lived in a lot of places. 90 is usually. Some people will hear 90 and they'll be like, "Oh, that's it."
Come over to Raleigh. True. It was 99. It was 9,900 this week. So yeah, definitely.
You need to go out to Nevada where it's a dry heat. It's not the same. It's dry heat. I don't know why they're always
the high desert.
Always on about the fucking dry heat.
I mean, yeah,
it makes a difference, man. I lived years in Idaho. I lived in years in Idaho in the high desert, and it really truly does make a difference.
Okay? We'll talk separate. I didn't know you lived in Idaho. I spent like my whole teenage years in Idaho.
That's funny. Yeah, we'll have to sync up offhand here, offline.
All right. Yeah, sorry. We'll get to the actual topic of today's episode. So today we want to talk about a term that we hear thrown around like everywhere. I hear it from all over the place, from lots of analysts and industry pundits. Everybody's always talking about economies of scale. So I guess today we're going to basically figure out what is it and what does it actually mean, and how does it impact you and the places you work as it relates to like journeys to the cloud, right? Either all in the cloud or hybrid cloud or staying on-prem. So that's going to be what we cover today. So let's start with what does economies of scale actually mean? Either you want to take a crack at what your definition is, right? We don't need like a textbook definition, just what you think of it.
So, I mean, it's not that hard, right? The economy of scale is this idea that, if it's kind of like the Costco, it's the Costco method, right? Where, you're going to buy in bulk, and because you're buying in bulk, because you're committing, laying that, more money down, that you're going to get a better price break. That's the same, like I said, I think of it as like the Costco model, but, that's the same with hardware. It's the same with software, bulk enterprise license agreement, like is basically the idea of an economy of scale of purchasing software, right? As it pertains to the cloud, I think the economy of scale is, and you hear this a lot, both in the for and against camp, the for camp very heavily, like all the CSPs, in like the 101, whatever it's this, like the AWS has the CCP, which is like the certified cloud practitioner, like everybody's 101 cert. One of the first things they tell you about the value prop of the cloud is the idea of an economy of scale. The idea that the CSPs are buying millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of silicon, and we're going to turn around and give that back to you in savings, right? So that's, to me, that's the idea of the economy of scale.
Okay. Yeah, no, I love that. The Costco example is great. Chris, you got anything to add to that, or?
No, I mean, pretty much right on the money. Obviously, it also kind of correlates with this concept that the CSPs have gotten so big and they're providing these services to so many customers that they're gaining so much from providing this that they can offer it to you at a lower price point, right? Because they have, they're potentially making money over, hand over fist on these products, right? That they can pass those cost savings down to you. But
so it would seem.
Yeah, that's. I think that's what we'll probably get into today, is whether or not that has actually happened at all. But yeah.
Yeah, and so basically I say that because, we were talking about this the other day, but when the cloud really first started kicking off and there was lots of conferences and, everybody was watching all the keynotes, there was always something about, oh, look how much we've cut prices in the last year, right? Like you used to see this all the time. And now, when's the last time you can say that you actually saw that brought up on a slide at a keynote, right? It's like, look at these 500 new features we added. So I guess the next question is, why aren't they still driving down costs, right? Like, is there a cause here that's making it so that the costs are not being lowered? Are they being higher? Like, why aren't we seeing that anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think the obvious trope that you could point out here is that they're just greedy, right? They're not gonna, they've convinced you that eventually you're going to get these savings and things like that, but they can, what they don't have to bring the prices down if they're continuing to get, a growing customer base every single day, right? So it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily the reason. I think that's the obvious one that, people will point to, pointing out, if they think that AWS or Microsoft is evil corp and things like that. So they're just never going to, do what's best for the consumer in that scenario. But, I don't know. I kind of wonder, cause, I start to wonder if this economy of scale thing was this pie in the sky idea that it may never get to due to the competitiveness of cloud. I mean, obviously we only have a few major CSPs in the conversation right now, right? So if we're talking about economies of scale, if we're talking about who has the biggest scale, we're probably going to be talking about, AWS and Azure, right? They're really the main players right here, right? And they're probably the ones that would be able to offer these discounts at this point, assuming that they've gotten over the hill. But if they're in this kind of like constant, competition with each other, I wonder if this economy of scale, like, does that only correlate to a level of scale that it's impossible to reach because of the competitiveness? I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here if it's a reality. But I don't know how you feel, Tim.
Yeah. So I definitely would agree. It's kind of a loaded. So I wanted to real quick address something you said that I hadn't considered. The idea generally is that competition or economy of scale or both, right, should just be driving down prices, period. And you see that not really necessarily happening. And we'll get into, I think we all have ideas about why that is, and we'll get into that a little bit later. I won't jump ahead too much. But the idea that like competition is driving prices in a way that, maybe economy of scales can't do yet. That's an interesting idea. So, because I was going to mention, you said like, probably AWS and Azure probably have the most scale. And I think that's probably true. Although I'm going to have to do some research after this. Maybe we can make it to see if there's anything published. That's the other thing, is the CSPs keep all this very close to the chest, right? So it's hard to say for sure that like, AWS and but very likely, I think you're right. But then, so you look at a place like GCP and it's like, obviously they're bankrolled. I mean, it's Google, right? So they've got a giant bankroll. So they can offer incentives that have nothing to do with economy of scale. They could just offer like, hey, we want to, and they do, right? They all do this, right? When they're looking for new people to jump clouds or to bring in big business, they'll offer almost like I always think of it as like the municipal tax break model, where like you come bring your business here and we'll give you the tax break, you know what I mean? Right, yeah. And that's not based on economy of scale at all, right? and so anyway, so to get back to the original, I think the actual economy of scale, and I'm using kind of air quotes here, I think I would agree that the actual economy of scale savings hasn't happened, but we've seen competition anyway because we have to. Like that, in theory, the whole free market thing of you have competition, and competition is good. It drives down prices, et cetera, et cetera. That's good, right? But in terms of the source, I think you're right. I think it has more to do with the competition and less to do with them saying, oh, well, we saved $10 million by buying in bulk. Let's go ahead and pass that on to the consumer. Because the growth model that these guys have seen, the CSPs have seen over the, hand over fist, 200, 300% year over year for years, right? It had to end somewhere, but at the same time,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah. No, you made a lot of great points. I love the municipality tax, relation, because that's exactly true, right? I mean, of course they're going to be like, oh, look at this great customer we have, right? Like if you look on their customer stories, I'm sure AWS is going to talk about like Netflix, right? Just because they're all in on AWS. So that's a really good point. And I think, I won't skip around too much because I think we kind of all agree on the same thing, that we're not there yet, that the economies of scale just haven't really happened yet like they were promised.
Right.
And the competition thing is also a good thing to point out, right? That usually would drive better prices in everywhere, right? Because everyone's going to be clamoring to get into the cloud. But I think I am going to transition to the next point about these CSPs also have to build out that infrastructure to host all these companies that want to come in, right? And I think we kind of all agree that that's really where the crux of this problem is they can't even keep up. Like it's impossible for them to, like they just cannot build out the infrastructure fast enough to onboard all of these new people that want to jump to the cloud. Do you guys have anything to add about that or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a great Packet Pushers episode about this on their Day 2 Cloud show with I think it was with who was on Charles Fitzgerald, Day 2 Cloud episode 190, where they talked about how the cloud spending, or the CapEx, relates to the growth and the success of the CSPs. And one of the major notes there is their spending, CapEx relates to mean you're in the game. You mean the more you're spending on this, the more that you're in the competitiveness of this nature, right? The numbers speak for themselves in that AWS and Azure are spending very, very large amounts, to do this, whereas the others are not quite in the same realm. I think Google has a few other things to deal with at the moment, with this paradigm shift for AI and things like that. So obviously they've got to remain competitive in that. And I don't know if that's going to affect how they contribute to the growth of GCP and things like that. But yeah, spending is how you're in the game. They're developing silicon, they're putting money into that. They purchase the undersea cables and things like that run all this infrastructure, right? So, I'm probably getting away from your original question, but it's no question that spend is happening, right? They're putting the efforts in. It's just. I wonder if it's just not, we haven't just gotten over this hill yet where they're putting all this money in where they can't, cut prices and things like that to give it back to us.
Yeah. And that Packet Pushers episode is really good. And Tim, you were mentioning, you didn't know if there was any like reports out there or stuff. That might be the only place that I've heard any kind of numbers like this. I don't know if you guys have heard them anywhere else, but I think that's really it. And he does go over it
put in the show notes because it's pretty eye-opening.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. So yeah, I just to give my 2 cents in there. So let's give my 2 cents in there. The yeah, so I think you're right, Alex, and I think we've talked about this multiple times that like the biggest reason we haven't seen those economy scales is exactly what Chris said. That well, two things, right? One is that hey, they're out there buying hardware. They're doing the capex investment to buy hardware, and they're doing it as fast as they can. We had COVID. Even before COVID, we had silicon shortages, right? COVID just exacerbated and extended the lifespan of all the silicon shortages. I remember when I was at Cisco, lead times of years on switches, right? Like, which brings something up that, maybe people haven't really thought about it, which is we talk about CSP competition for customers. What about the CSP competition for silicon? For the supply chain that feeds the beast. You got AWS developing their own silicon. That's cool, but they still have to source it. Like all that, they don't have as far as I know, Jeff Bezos hasn't bought any silicon mines in Africa or anything yet, right? So, I mean, that stuff still has to be sourced.
As far as we know. Yeah.
As far as we know, right? So, that's at the end of the day, the CSPs are also not just competing for customers, they're competing for silicon, and they're competing with people who've been here forever. Juniper, Cisco, pick a tech, pick anything that uses tech, and there's competition for that silicon. That's just another reason I think we haven't seen that cost savings of the economy of scale, because the CSPs, I think, and we don't know, right? Because it's not like they publish any of this, but maybe I have to check out the Packet Pushers episode as well. Do they cover like the kind of prices that they're paying for this silicon? Like that they're, are they compete,
I don't think that's covered in any of the.
I mean, I doubt they would disclose that, but I guarantee you that they're not paying market. They're probably paying above market.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised. I got to take a quick side tangent here on the custom silicon stuff. I mean, does it even make sense to you guys that they are doing that? Like, what is the benefit of them having their own, right? Because if they're also competing with their own suppliers, with like all the people that they're bringing in hardware and stuff for, doesn't that just cause more of an issue? Isn't that like a continuation of it?
Well, so like, Cisco for the longest time use Broadcom as the vendor silicon provider for their switches. And then they moved in-house to develop ASICs. Because if you think about it, and I'm not sure this is the answer, right? But I think this is the answer. ASICs at the end of the day are just programmed chips, right? You're programming them to do a specific function. So AWS has probably reached the point with their cloud underlay fabric, whatever you want to call it, where it might make sense for them to actually develop their own ASICs for their own specific use cases.
Well, yeah. And also, right, for their own specific use cases, because, I mean, they know what they need out of their gear, right? That they might not be getting from the vendors.
Right.
So, yeah. Chris, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like this kind of concept was also there when DPDK was like the hot thing, right? Because you can customize the way DPDK, these things operate to do exactly what you want, right? So who better to fit that description than the CSPs, right? But yeah, I think like you said, Alex, it's kind of like if the competition is there internally right now for that, like is this kind of a chicken and egg problem? Like you're just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul type thing, you know what I mean? So it's got to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy too. I mean, you see 2 points. So you see like the stock prices of like Arista, right? Arista is huge in the CSPs, and I'm not claiming to be an economist or anything, but I'm sure a lot of that is tied to just how much gear and support and stuff they're having to provide to all the CSPs, right?
Yeah.
It's no secret that Arista is huge in all of them.
That's true.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. The other, I lost my train of thought on the other one. But I'll come back to it when I remember. All right. let's see. So what about, so we mentioned like larger enterprises earlier, right? So they get a lot of benefit from this, right? Because they're going to be buying the most. So do you think they get preferential, right, from the CSPs because they're going to be providing so much upfront?
I mean, that's how the enterprise commit works, right? Like the enterprise, EDP or whatever they call it. I can't remember the word they use. Where you pay basically, you say you commit to spending a certain amount and they'll give you a discount, right. Kind of like the reserved instances thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I'm wondering too, right? Because that basically earmarks capacity.
It does. Right? Reserved instances is nothing but earmarked capacity, right?
Yeah. So, okay, I just remember my second point. So this ties into this. So you mentioned COVID, right? Also, it disrupted supply chain, but it also, at the same time, brought more people wanting to go to the cloud. So it's like we had just double whammy all over the place. It's
true. I wonder if that's why we saw the 200, 300% growth, like just the insane amounts of growth for the CSPs, like all at once, basically. It was like double whammy type stuff. Like everybody was moving out of their data centers, right? Everybody was going hybrid or remote. Everybody was thinking it was going to be remote from there, right? And so everybody was putting all their stuff into the cloud at that point. Mm-hmm. I don't remember a lot of capacity problems, though. And maybe I'm glossing over it. Maybe you just don't forget about it. But actually at that time, maybe they had sufficient capacity and then they couldn't predict, how much and how quickly, right. And, like how much it would spike, maybe.
Yeah, I think what's the general rule of thumb is like they're spending and they're putting in infrastructure planning for what capacity is the requirements for capacity are gonna be like six months ahead of time. So maybe at the moment they had the capacity, but I mean, we saw recently, capacity issues with Azure and things like that. I feel like that was a huge thing. So I don't know if that was just everything coming to a head or what, but like you said, no one could have predicted this. So I'm actually surprised we didn't see more of it. But yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, which is another reason we haven't seen that economy of scale money back, right? So the demand outstrips the supply by probably such a large amount, right? That they can't lower the prices. They can't lower them.
I think also like it kind of relates to the fact that, that economy of scale is kind of a nice to have thing when you refer to migration to the cloud, right? It's not a need to have. It's never been, a concrete why people are going to go to the cloud. The why is, increased agility and availability and things like that, right? So you kind of, and when you do that investment, you're saying, okay, well, like this is what we're going to pay for this now, not what we're going to potentially get discounted, 2 to 3 years from now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't make those decisions necessarily at the company I work for or any company that I've ever worked for. So maybe two people do operate like that, but that just seems like that's never going to be in the forefront of your mind, right? So it can it's probably just fallen by the wayside, right? Because there's obviously been other very, very high profile requirements in front of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, everyone's always trying to talk about how much they're trying to cut down on cost, right? And yeah, I don't think a lot of us get to make those decisions, unfortunately. So
yep.
Well, and people went to the cloud initially not to save money, but to have the development environment, have the agility to produce stuff, right? The whole shadow IT thing that we always talk about. That developers were the primary users of the cloud because they needed that development environment that was hard to provision on-prem. So I agree completely that the idea of economy of scale was something that came later, right? Because the original Amazon product was just excess compute. Right? There was no idea of an economy of scale. It was just like, hey, whatever we're not using, we can lease to you for a price.
Yeah, right. I think that was the original idea, right? It was Bezos. I think, I don't know. I don't remember the full story, but it was something like Bezos came in and was like, we got all this extra compute. How can we lease it out or something to other departments? Okay. I got a little bit of another side tangent here. So with all of these, and this isn't really directly related to economies of scale, but more how the CSPs kind of operate. So because, as we've established, they have like multi-vendor devices in there, right? So they might have Juniper, they might have Apstra, they might have Cisco, they might have whatever, white box, Dell, right? Whatever you have.
Whatever's on sale.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever's on sale, whatever can get there the fastest. They don't care. Just send it all. I mean, what do you guys think about, right? I hear a lot about Sonic, being used as like the operating system. So I'm curious, like, if you guys have any thoughts about the CSPs. They have to have some kind of like multi-vendor approach for automating all of these devices, right? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this and like how that might trickle down, I guess, to enterprises, if that makes sense.
So when you say trickle down enterprise, you mean the idea of just taking, being able to automate a multi-vendor environment, right? That's basically what we're thinking about.
Yeah. Being able to just, do networking on any device, and it doesn't really matter what the hardware is.
I mean, that's the pipe dream, or that's the pie. I say pipe dream. That's not right. It's like that's the pie in the sky idea, right? Is that to take the cloud model of being able to essentially automate the delivery of infrastructure for development and do that in an on-prem way. Like that was the ACI dream, right? Like that was the app driven dream. That's the Apstra dream. That's the whatever, pick your SDN. So I think enterprises want it, but I think the challenge is that enterprises are not in the business of developing solutions of that scale and complexity. Like, unless you're in that business, 100%. Right? Unless that's your business, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's
and that's the challenge.
And there's costs associated with that, right? We're for operating a multi-vendor environment like that. And I honestly, due to lack of exposure and obviously moving to the cloud, I don't know if there's been a lot of kind of forward movement in this space. But I remember specifically with automation in the networking infrastructure world, I felt like there was always this complaint that the vendors aren't putting in, kind of like these kind of consistent APIs across the board that can make this easier to do. So if you do want to kind of just use that operating model of, buy whatever's on sale and get it in there, I don't know if the vendors have made that exactly the easiest thing to do. So, there's got to be, drawbacks to that. Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. To the same thing, the buying in bulk thing, if CSP is like, hey, Juniper said if we buy, this many, then we get it, at, near cost, you know what I mean? So it's like, it happens in both scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you and I worked on Viptela, Chris, for how long? And dude, that it seems like every version the API changed for a while, right? It was impossible to write anything. Yeah,
whenever I had a customer that would come in and be like, yeah, we're thinking about, building our own custom things to use the API. I was like, good luck, man. Thankfully I wasn't the one helping with that, but it was, I know it was a constant pain point for people.
And not just Viptela, that has been a standard for so long, right? Like pick a version of any Cisco IOS or Juniper, whatever. Pick a
managing API versions is a difficult thing, no matter what vertical job you're in. Yeah, it's insane.
So I like the idea. I think the operational model on-prem would actually be pretty cool, but I think most businesses, and honestly, if we're being honest, most network vendors are not up to the challenge, or haven't been. I'm throwing down the gauntlet to all the network vendors out there to make that happen, and in a way that customers can actually afford and adopt. That's the gauntlet.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's like you said, that is the. You said pipe dream wasn't the right word, but I'm gonna say that is the pipe dream.
Yeah, it's like I used to have this friend Oh, no, I still have this friend actually. He used to have a coworker, and I remember he told me this story one time that the guy used to come in, like he worked in like a help desk, like sysadmin type spot. And he said the guy was a super tall guy. He'd always walk in every single day with 2 liters of soda that he would drink in that one day, which is crazy. And he said like he would always come in with like Diet Mountain Dew. And he said one day the dude came in with like it was like the oddest form of like Diet Pepsi that you could buy. And he's like, hey man, you got a new one today? And he's like, he figured out that day that he doesn't check any of it. He just sees what's the cheapest thing and buys it. And he's like, I don't care what it is. I just got to get it in me. And until we can get that way with, with these, I don't think you're going to see that, that benefit kind of come to fruition.
Well, and no network vendor is going to write the multi-vendor version of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's at the end of the day, right? For enterprises to consume, no, when one network vendor is going to write the NSO, to call it out, right? The NSO that's really going to do all of that for everybody.
But I mean, that's why these over the top, software vendors that do this are so marketable, right?
Oh yeah. And I mean, you got to think about the people that are doing it at the CSPs. I mean, I'm sure eventually some of them are going to get tired of working so much at the CSPs, and they're going to move out into these smaller places or start companies that are going to try to commercialize that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's happened yet. At least I don't know of anyone that has left a CSP and come up with a solution like that. I guess like Tim, you mentioned Apstra earlier, maybe because I know a lot of the guys that founded Apstra did go on to work for CSPs. So it's kind of the opposite, but who knows? I guess we'll see.
Maybe there's a heavy IP like stuff in place where you're supposed to forget once you leave.
Well, that's a good point too. That's definitely possible. Yeah. All right. So what about what can smaller companies do then? Right. So we talked about large companies a lot that can kind of come in, and of course they buy in bulk and they get these crazy discounts. But how's that going to work for these smaller companies that don't even know their capacity that they need? Like, how do they get advantage of cheaper, or do they just have to wait until there's so much infrastructure out there that the CSPs are begging people to come on and use their stuff?
Just get acquired by a bigger company. That's all they can do. No, I'm just kidding.
No, there's no. Yeah, this is one where I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like I don't know how a small company. Not how, because the answer is if that day ever comes that the CSPs have outstripped demand and have supply. On that magical day, we will see those savings from the economy of scale in theory, right? And then those customers who don't have, the 500-pound gorillas that are swinging around, that they'll finally benefit by proxy, essentially. Like, it's just not, I don't know what to say, but like, the AWS, Azure, GCP, like if you're a small business, I mean, we're happy to take your money, but they're not going to give you a TAM, right? They're not going to assign resources to take care of you, right? You're just not, it doesn't make business sense, right? It's like the Bill Gates thing where like, if he stops to pick up a $100 bill off the street, he's lost money because, in the time it took him to pick up the $100, right? It just is the way it is.
Yeah, and I think obviously the biggest benefit that small businesses can probably benefit from this is using not necessarily the kind of like cheaper options for infrastructure, because obviously if you need to buy like thousands and thousands of hours of instance costs and things like that, then they're probably not going to see a direct benefit there. But these like services that are already offered and are either offered at a very cheap price point or are getting cheaper, that it's kind of more like they would need to change the way things operate. Like if you can, like if I'm, Megacorp and I pay, so much money for Lambda, right? And I'm running Lambda functions, obviously they're already cheap in the first place, but like if I'm a smaller company, I'm going to be running a significantly less number of Lambda functions, and I can leverage that, but I also need to change the way I operate. And we kind of got into this on one of the previous episodes, but it's more like, do they have the time and the funds to put into redeveloping applications and, migrating off of infrastructure and things like that? It's, I don't think there's necessarily anything they can do to make the CSPs be like, oh, you notice me, senpai kind of thing. Like, I think they just kind of have to like, change and adopt to leverage where the cost savings are already there.
Well, yeah. And, finding the people as well. Like if you're a small company, how are you going to hire those people? Those people currently, at least,
right?
It's a rare skill set, right? So people that you want to bring on to optimize your architecture, or refactor apps, or containerize, whatever, all the trendy words, those people are going to command a higher salary. So
that's a supply and demand thing too, just like the infrastructure itself, right? Being able to, the demand for those people is higher than the supply, so it would be harder for a small business to compete even in that arena. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, not only rare, not cheap either. So that's everyone.
Absolutely. It'll happen over time. I think eventually skill sets will kind of level out, but it's going to be a while.
All these people going through their 6-week boot camp, wanting their 6 figures. It's all sixes.
That was a previous episode. Yeah. I should. We should start a boot camp. 6 weeks to 6 figures. No, we're not going to do that.
No. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go around real quick and get any final thoughts, and then I think we'll wrap it up. I think we've talked about this pretty in depth, and I think we kind of all come to a lot of the same conclusions. So, got any last things to add? Tim, we'll just start with you.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole economy of scale thing, on its own, it's one of the things that logically it makes sense, right? The idea, the Costco model, right? It makes sense. And again, like just to reiterate, I think that the reason we haven't seen it yet is because demand and infrastructure, again, is far outstripping those supply. Do I think we'll ever get to the point where demand is lower and the supply is higher and we see it? I think it has to happen eventually, even if the reason it happens is because God knows what comes along and disrupts it, and then people are doing something different, right?
The next big thing after cloud.
Or the AI overlords like launch the robot revolution and it doesn't matter anymore. Then you probably get great prices. But so it's very hard to take advantage of an economy of scale in that respect. However, you'll notice that the CSPs are still going to have that in all of their documentation and all of their certifications. All I can say is, again, it's one of those things where it makes sense on paper. It should make sense in real life. It just hasn't happened. So is it a problem if they say it? That they say, hey, here's the economy of scale. We can pass the savings on to you. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Is that it's not lying, because the idea is that, like, in theory, yeah, it should work, but I think it's still going to be a while before we actually see that happen.
Yeah, totally agree. I think obviously when cloud was new, and I mean, we're still at a point where it's still kind of new to a lot of organizations and professionals out here. So I think, it was easy to talk about when it was new, like, oh, this is in the, like you said, it's in the foundational certification tracks that you go through for the CSPs as well, that like, hey, this is a major benefit. I think as individuals that are contributing to this market and we're, not working for the CSPs, I feel like we just need to stop talking about it like it's a benefit until it can come to fruition, because if it never comes to fruition, it was never a benefit to begin with, right? So it's like, I would almost just say, like, if you're writing a business proposition for your company and you're trying to convince them to move something to the cloud, do not list this as an item. Do not even kind of give any kind of credit to this.
Don't let them shoot you down.
Yeah, exactly. Let's make them put their money where their mouth is. Start reporting these numbers again. Start putting these in the slide decks when, hey, we reduced these prices because of, this amount of scale, et cetera, right? I feel like we just need to kind of, like I said, make them put their money where their mouth is,
Yeah, no, I like it. And to Tim's question, right? It's not that they're not lying about it. It's just that it's easy to tell people as there's still plenty of people starting to come into the cloud, right?
Right.
So that's something they're going to want to hear. I'm sure a lot of it is like marketing, right? You're trying to get the ear of these finance people that are making the decisions without the people that know better.
I'm sure there's plenty of former billionaires where like they were like, hey, if you keep giving me money, eventually I'll give it back to everyone. I'll give it back to the community. I'll do all the
the trickle down economics theory.
The trickle down. That's exactly it. So I don't believe that now, and until it starts happening, I won't believe it.
I love it.
Yeah, that was great. All right. Any last thoughts, or we good?
No, just one closing thing, not related to the show, but I do want to point out we now have, against Alex's best will to keep us off of it, we now have a TikTok account that we're starting to use. I don't know what's going to come of it, but that's we're definitely going to be putting clips from the show and who knows, maybe some other things on there. So definitely find us. We'll put that in the show notes as well. TikTok is like Cables2Clouds.
Clips of Chris's birds.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
So many birds.
That's a good idea. That could be the content. I didn't even think about that.
I see.
Damn, dude. See.
People like birds, man.
Yeah.
People like birds.
And I like the birds too. So it's win-win. So yeah, follow us on TikTok. We'll have Alex do some dances or something at some point. And,
he's going to floss.
That's not going to happen.
It's going to happen, dude. We'll get Addison Rae on there dancing with you or something. You guys probably don't even know who that is. I barely know who it is.
Should I?
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
No, just leave it. Leave it out. Just keep it a mystery. You don't need to know.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all very much for tuning in to the Cables2Clouds podcast today. If you like this episode, please share it around to anyone you think might be interested. Give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcatcher. And of course, hit those like and subscribe buttons on YouTube. And as Chris pointed out, follow us on TikTok, all the socials. We got it everywhere. So until next time. Hi, everyone. It's Alex. And this has been the Cables2Clouds podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcatcher, as well as subscribe and turn on notifications for our YouTube channel to be notified of all of our new episodes. Follow us on socials at Cables2Clouds. You could also visit our website for all of the show notes at Cables2Clouds.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.